Welcome to episode 9 of Space Buzz the podcast. We're already into 2021 and it continues to be a stormy situation when it comes to the economy, generally speaking. But let's focus on that little ray of sunshine that continues to grow throughout the country known as the marijuana industry. Many people commonly assume that the most obvious way to make money in this new exploding market is to grow it, sell it, or both. Another assumption is that growing plants or operating a dispensary is solely the territory of experts in the field. Well, those people will be wrong in both assumptions. There's definitely still plenty of room for passionate beginners to get into the marijuana industry, and there are far more ways to generate and create a living than just having a dispensary or becoming a grower. So today we're going to discuss a little bit about how the marijuana industry creates job growth and stimulates the economy in ways not so initially obvious to people. So how's everybody feeling now that we're in 2021?
Feels like it's already a weird year. It's a trip.
Yeah, I'm curious to how the pacing of this year is going to be just compared to how the last one is. It's like hard to see everything from last year. Just there was so much. And like when you go back and look at certain pieces, you're like, oh, that happened. And
right.
You don't even think about it.
Well, these pessimists. I'm looking forward to some new shit and some changes in 2021. So, yeah, man. Positivity and rainbows over here.
Yeah, me too. There's just been it's definitely a lot to process. You're like, oh yeah, remember there was wildfires. Oh yeah, remember those different protests, right? Remember, right? Just going back. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm kind of excited to move on, at least forward, and optimistically. Okay, so let's start with the industry itself, such as retail or cultivation jobs, for example. So Philip and Megan, you've both found a home in the industry and seem to have a desire to stay in it long term, at least so far, and potentially for a career. So why did you choose cannabis versus all the other mainstream options?
Well, for me personally, I've had a lot of pushback on cannabis since I started smoking when I was a lot younger, so it's definitely been something that's been really consistently, I don't know, for me personally positive, for but everybody else in my life kind of negative. So it's been a lot of fun, I guess you could say, to be able to prove it to myself and everybody else that cannabis is definitely something that's worth it, and you can definitely make a living off of it, and it's really powerful in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it seems like depending on where you are, it can still be a big stigma where people are kind of raising their eyebrow, or they're really excited and they're interested to hear more about it.
When I moved out to Oregon, I figured there would be a business with more opportunities, and this industry is so new. There's not a lot of industries that I think will be as big as this one that you can really get the ground floor on. I worked in alcohol-beverage industry before this, and you kind of see that industry is so saturated by big players, it's hard to, just kind of get in on the ground floor and feel like you're really making an impact.
Yeah, trying to sell a new brand to a bar or a new kind of liquor is very difficult
and
compared to bringing in a new kind of strain that you may have created or something like that.
And the one thing is in business that I like about this industry in particular is that there's like a real authenticness in the cannabis industry here in Oregon, and in business I feel like that can get kind of lost.
Yeah, like everybody in this industry seems to really want to be here or are willing to kind of take the risk of social ridicule or of different kinds to actually kind of stand behind what they believe in or what they've researched. So Rich, have you ever considered actually crossing over to the green side, or what has your perspective been working or on people working in the marijuana industry? Do you think it's changed over time, having more exposure to us, so to speak?
I've gone through a lot of interactions actually with the green industry just because I've worked in entertainment, and those two industries were naturally going to connect.
Right.
At some
Music
point.
especially.
But I remember one of the most vivid memories I have is when we did a entertainment deal where we did a number of promotional events with a grow operation in Seattle, and then I had to go and pick up the money, but at that point it was all cash. And so then I had to pick up $20,000 in cash because this was like 4 major concerts.
Oh wow!
That
so
we were putting
at least
on
big
for
bills,
them.
or was it just like
Yeah.
everything?
But this was the most money I've ever had on my person ever, and suddenly I'm driving in a little car to go rental smart car with $20,000 in my bag next to me, driving it across to hand it to the owners of the business who then were going to go deposit it. But it was just a funny interaction right away because it still had the seedy drug side of the business to it, but it was a legitimate business.
Yeah, and it still follows around, some of the issues behind some of the banking we talked about before, but it makes everybody kind of lean on cash a lot, which even when you're paying just regular industry, like radio or billboard advertising agencies, and they have to come by and pick up all this cash, you're legitimizing your business like anyone else, but because of that aspect to it, it still has this strange kind of, I don't know, gray area feel to it.
Totally.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, is working with entertainment and the cannabis industry is the same thing, like as Philip was was referring to, was like with the alcohol industry. Like there was concert venues and, you know, musicians and things work with alcohol brands all the time. And the cannabis industry is a whole nother way, and it's just the natural creative connections between entertainment and, you know, between those two industries is just natural for these kinds of connections. So
it's been like that unspoken background or air in the room forever, really, kind of around the industry.
Yeah, and then it's just seeing it grow. I mean, going from, you know, medical to, you know, legalize, and, you know, it is funny because I will always be that generation that's looking over their shoulder, right? Because if you're raised at a certain time where it's not legal, you know, but now I see the young kids going around and just,
well, even still where you smoke, it still depends. You could still have to look around.
Right, but some people are just fearless. And I was like, I want to live like you.
Well, it's strange going to another state suddenly where they have no legislation and you feel like, whoa, I mean, just the air is different in general.
It's amazing me to New York City is when I go to that, and it's such a weed positive culture in New York City, but it's still, you know, there's no dispensaries or any
but
of
it's
that.
Still around. You smell it.
It's still
parks,
under the table, but they can literally post about it online and say, call us here.
Right.
And you're just like...
Yeah, the accessibility is strangely consistent and right out there in the open.
Is that more of like a black market venture or gray market?
I see you'd have to be all black, I guess. Anything that's really not on the level.
So they have no licensing or anything, right? Because there's no...
Well, there's trucks that drive around selling edibles, but I'm just like,
well,
never gonna
New York
buy
doesn't,
from that.
They don't allow you to collect petitions and signatures to put, say, marijuana on a ballot. So they have to introduce it, and that's can take longer than most states. So what they did was they reenacted an old edible law, which was the fastest way to allow some sort of medical marijuana. But it kind of leaves gray. Who grows it? How do you get it? And this is sort of similar that happened with the other industries when they started. When they say, okay, you can have marijuana. Well, how do you grow it? Where do you get the seeds? How does that work? Because they're not all here. Where do you get the cuts from? So it still creates its challenges. But that's how kind of New York got their edible scene underway.
Right, okay.
So I'd say the rest of it is still yet to be...
It just feels like a tourist trap, honestly, when you're in New York and you see these vans. You're just like, nah.
Somebody sent me pictures. I said, what do you think about this? I'm like, as far as I know, they're nowhere close to the licensing that would support that legitimately. You know, so, I mean, they have, I think, Columbia Care is one place that is a legitimized place, but they're not driving around in ice cream trucks.
They're just getting on the ground floor, guys. They're just getting it to you.
All right, so... Besides your own personal job experiences of what you actually found your jobs to be when you got into the industry, did you actually did you explore other jobs within the cannabis industry first? And then what have your experiences been with the other people you've come across that work in the cannabis industry, between either vendors that come in and out of the store or just through other companies or anything like that?
I did a little bit of like glass sales and stuff before I got necessarily in the cannabis industry, but it was mostly just because I wasn't 21 yet, you know, so you kind of had to start somewhere. But interactions with other people and stuff always seem to be really genuine, and it's definitely a different industry. I think just based off of the people you work around, you all have similar interests, and all just kind of want to make it better for everybody else is what I've seemed to come across, which is really nice.
I've done some trimming work, just kind of on the seasons that people really need it, and
everybody kind of has at some point, right? If you're in the
see
industry, you've trimmed,
yeah,
right? I mean, you probably trimmed, aren't even in the industry.
I think everyone in the industry has trimmed at some point or another. It's just an easy gig to pick up, and you get
even
it really.
If you just have a friend with backyard plants,
exactly.
man.
Yeah, if you're trustworthy enough to somebody at some point.
It's crazy how much you can learn too just from trimming. I mean, if you trim enough weed, you'll start to learn the bud structure, what stuff smells like, you know, what the feel and, you know, all that stuff. So it's definitely a good learning experience.
You get a
too.
really unique culture with the people too.
Yeah, there's always some different people. It's a melting
wide
pot,
variety of people from very different walks of life.
Very true. Yeah, drifters, every kind. Yeah.
But I think that's one thing that's really interesting about this industry is you have people, I think, that got in on the legal front and they have more of a business background, and cannabis is kind of a secondary hobby, or they can see the money that comes with it. Or you have people who started more in the black market and are kind of adapting to a more legalized business model.
Right, which sometimes, I think the merger of both is usually it tends to be more successful because in the beginning you get people that start off that were more likely to take the risk because they were already taking the risk. So why not? And then suddenly it's, wow, this is a business opportunity, and there's things that go along with that.
Well, I mean,
so
a lot of the
people
growers
help you or you don't.
A lot of the growers have to come from somewhere. It's not like they picked up this experience just randomly
Right,
in
or
the last
magically
couple of years.
decided, let's learn how to grow weed suddenly. I
Right.
mean, yeah, there's a huge culture that had been going on here.
Especially here in Oregon. I mean, I think we live in a weed wonderland for sure. There's so much history and so much to learn.
Well, one of my first experiences in Eugene was that we put on a comedy show, and the comedian called out to the audience and said, "So what's the major industry here?" And there were about 40 people in the audience of like 1,300 that just yelled at the same time, "Weed!" and everyone laughed, but also no one was just like, no, there was no other coherent
Well, the
thing
amount of
called
jobs
out.
that it creates now, it's crazy. I mean, just between all the retail stores, between the wholesalers, the vendors, the growers themselves, all the ancillary help that comes along with it.
That's definitely one thing I think I take into account a lot of the times when I want to think about starting my own grow, is that there's so much that goes to putting that together, so many different parts and pieces and people that you need to make a grow successful, and that's just one aspect of the business, or industry rather.
Well, we've even joked about this of like trying to buy a house in Eugene, and like 90% of them have a former grow op. It's some part of that house.
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret. If you look at the grow shops, there are so many grow shops around here. It's like there's not that many people doing gardening out here.
All right, Rich, so what about you? What's your experience been like with, as far as the kind of different sales experiences you've had in different stores? I mean, what's the spectrum been like for you as far as customer service experiences?
There's a whole spectrum, because I've, definitely seen it now in Washington and Oregon, and there are still times, like when you're just like in a new area and you're passing through somewhere, you're just trying to like, find somewhere new, so you'll just look on a map and just go to the local dispensary, and you can still end up at some weird places with like weird lighting and like a light's twitching in the back of the room, and you're just like, all right,
the exit signs flickering.
I remember visiting like Colorado. I was amazed at just after an industry that had evolved so fast, how there were still places that were just so strangely laid out from just a purely bad functionality point.
Well, and then there were some that it's just that got caught in between this medical to normal, to where there's like the waiting room and everything's sterile and has to look a certain way. So that's like why I kind of love where it's gotten to now, and especially why I love, this store in particular, is because it has character. And, the sci-fi theme and just the outer world vibe just makes it a fun thing and a fun connection to the experience.
Right. It has to be backed up by the people working there.
Right. And, these things just have to evolve. It's like you didn't have, like, dedicated sci-fi bars until, like, the last 20 years, when people were like, oh, maybe we should actually make the cantina from Star Wars.
Right. They had that cool one down in California. I think Kevin Smith was saying one of his friends put that up.
Yeah. And, it's just once you can actually start to connect passions to each other is when you can really, like, develop an audience and a core customer base. So seeing that evolve, and then it's just, I'm always astounded that when I actually have questions about weed, is like I'm usually always given as much information as I need, or too much information, which is a good thing in a way, because it just means that at least they know what they're talking about.
If I go here, just or in general, you feel like you're
at this point,
finding that in most
earlier
places.
in it, I would ask people about weed and then be like, I don't know, this one's pretty, and you're just like, it's. I think it's a little bit more to like.
I think the jobs are getting more competitive. I think people are really trying to stand out, and more people want to cross over into this industry. So the more you can learn and actually be able to provide a thorough customer experience is becoming more important for employers and just other bud tenders that want to work and collaborate and continue to learn with other people that are kind of pushing the education forward.
Right. Well, there's a craft and an artisanal quality to marijuana, and I think that when you get to encounter people who care about the culture of it, like you can have really great experiences and learn from it.
Personally passion driven, just as a kind of sort of splitting the hairs like we were talking about. I mean, it's really fun to kind of get into each little detail, and it's hard, and some people can do it with wine, and they have that gift to just split hairs on every little flavor profile. it's a little more blurred for me in that area. But with marijuana, it's just something that I've always loved, and it's driven the passion to get further educated. The further you get more excited about it, and you tell more people about it, and the more people you bring together like that, it creates sort of an exciting environment to learn about things and make connections together.
And think about just like in the last 10 years how much things have moved. Like this has been exponential growth. So like we're only going to see better strains, more unique strains, just at an exponential rate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's also a tremendous amount of ancillary businesses that benefit from the cannabis industries, like we were talking about. And this kind of ranges from regulatory jobs, like the OLCC in Oregon, to packaging and security jobs that most people don't even think about. I mean, just landlords alone have hugely benefited from renting previously vacant and unwanted warehouse spaces or retail locations at premiums now, where cannabis has been legalized. So this has had a positive ripple effect when you replace empty retail locations with thriving businesses, obviously. And there was even a recent study I think I saw last year showing that being located close to dispensaries actually brought real estate property values up when initially they were thought and projected to have had the opposite effect, or at least that's what the initial narrative was. So, to you guys, what are some of the other ancillary or auxiliary businesses that you've seen boost or even created by the cannabis industry alone? And we'll get into some other industries that benefit from it later, but which, while also are necessary for growth and competition, in some cases, actually, cannabis companies still can't write off, if you can believe that. But without getting more into that, what are some of the kinds of other businesses you've seen that have benefited from the cannabis industry?
Definitely on the grow side, I mean, the nutrients is something that we kind of touched on earlier with the grow shops and stuff like that. So nutrient companies have definitely skyrocketed. Lots of new microorganisms are trying to be put into living soil and stuff they can put on the shelf, which is kind of cool. And lights, regular equipment that you need. Trellis is a huge thing. So things like that are really benefiting.
Just everything you really need to support grow
op, yeah.
Right?
Water, soil,
even just lumber, building, buckets,
air conditioners. We have to have somebody come out and check our air conditioners often. It's crazy. Electricians,
contractors coming out doing custom builds.
Exactly. I mean, that's again. There's so many things and so many pieces that add up to make it complete.
Do you find that these contractors are always open to it,
it's so interesting because I'm always really nervous when they walk into the rooms, right? Because I'm like, are they expecting to see like 500 plus plants in this room right now? And they always seem really chill about it. And
in security, you got to be careful about who you let into these things, and you got to be careful about where they've been as far as just contamination goes.
We have to have them spray their feet all the time when they come in, and they're really nice about it. They make sure to ask before they move anything around, so it seems like they're pretty on board and they're really chill. I mean, another aspect too is having people do like your payroll and your deposits and accountants and stuff like that too. I mean, that's a whole nother side of things
which again you can't write off in most cases.
Exactly, you can't write that off, which is wild because they're helping you with your finances. It's just
there's a lot of like secondary businesses that just run around it, like just devices to smoke, glass, packaging,
just direct to cannabis alone, packaging,
compliance bags, vape batteries. I mean, there are so many, just even like ATMs. That's a whole nother thing. Yeah.
The doctor's offices, that just have the receptions that are just running the whole infrastructure that puts the medical cards into circulation.
Yeah.
I mean, like we said, the OLCC. I mean, the regulatory jobs. People, and that sort of has helped balance out the unfortunate thing. It's like you don't need law enforcement to be going after cannabis anymore, but you also don't want to take away jobs from law enforcement. And this has sort of been a great way to kind of counteract that, because you still need an industry that needs regulation. So that's been a nice way that you still create jobs, and they're kind of taking them away but replacing them with similar infrastructure. So there's even just like the safes, just things like that. I mean, that you just need to run your day-to-day business. That really
security cameras
themselves, the security businesses themselves. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the largest expenses in either starting a grow license or retail industry.
One of the biggest requirements,
Yeah, and I think it's probably more stringent than any other industry's requirements as far as the pixelation and the coverage.
And the angles that you have to have.
It's like product has to always be on camera, right?
Yeah, you have to have it backed up for months. So they make it, lucrative for a lot of other businesses to get involved to help support the industry succeed.
And it has bigger impacts on that too. It's just like from even a community perspective, from any time that there's a new industry, that's a new industry of sponsorships that might be available for various things in the community, from community organizations to event sponsorships. And like in my perspective, like there's so many more opportunities now to find companies that want to support arts. And
well, like we were saying, they're linked together naturally. So of course, why wouldn't we want to get involved with the shows and the art and all?
You're telling me that weed and music go well together,
right? Except you can't write it off. So it sort of de-incentivizes cannabis companies from trying to kind of spread that around, which they would happily be doing if you could promote things. Like look at the trade shows that happen. Look at how people promote. Why are they so exciting and successful? Because companies can try and top each other to compete to show brand value, and it's exciting. But you have to be able to write that stuff off because that's why you're doing it. So that sort of limits. I mean, you're sort of between a rock and a hard place because you have to do it because you have to compete and you have to be found by customers. But at the same time, it just runs into a lot of challenges because you're sort of being taxed in a way that's not fairly representing you, and it's just. Well,
it's also the trouble with the tourism side of it because, like at the start, like as the early states were passing things, weed tourism was a legit thing, but you still had this issue of sure you could buy it, but you can't consume it, and there wasn't really like a chain of hotels that opened up that said, sure, we're all green hotels.
Well, we can't deliver, for example, legally to hotels, which I can understand because there's dangers in doing that with lack of accountability for who's staying there, so I can get that. But yeah, I mean, even just attracting people from other states, how do you advertise to a state that you can't advertise cannabis in? So you can't even reach those people in certain ways. That the glory days for cannabis tourism,
right? There's still a future of that
for sure.
I mean, if you have to think about like how long did it take for microbreweries to get to where they are now, like, and that's all happened in the last 20 years. And it's huge, and now there's a massive beer industry that has really eaten into the profits of like the major guys there. So and you know, weed's gonna get there. I can't wait till I get to like go rent a place on a weed farm and get to be taken around and with a weed sommelier.
Right, like they have like a Mary Jane's Ranch, or you know, even here, you know, bud and breakfast themes and things like that. I think are gonna be very popular, but it just needs to have certain limitations in the tax codes that sort of create fair business opportunities for the industry as a whole to allow them to sort of really thrive in those markets. But even with its limitations, they're forced to still do these things, which also, you know, like getting print things made all over the community, and they still want to sponsor things, and we sponsor things with you in the past, and it's a natural way to permeate the community with your business.
Well, anything that just brings more opportunity to have community events, right? That's what it all boils down to.
Which creates more jobs also.
Right. And it's all cyclical, and it's all revenue generating. Like when you help support your community and they come down and the downtown's more thriving, like all those things like help create more commerce.
And marijuana always plays well with the food industry, so it's always fun. People like to get a taste of Eugene. It blends well together, kind of get a little culture, get a little food. It's fun, you know, go see a show, go see a movie, go laugh about some things. So, okay, so let's get back to kind of getting into the industry and what it's like working in it. So what was it like for you guys trying to break in and decide what aspect of the industry you wanted to focus on once you did? Because it is really hard to find a cannabis job, or at least one that you like, or even just getting into the industry if you don't have some crazy experience or you weren't in it before but you have a love for it. I mean, some people think you just smoke a lot of weed, you're perfect for it, but that's really not the case. I mean, what's been your experience trying to get in, and what would you tell people that might want to try?
Yeah, I mean, if you're truly passionate about cannabis, I mean, if you have the ability, I think now's the time to get in on it, because I think it only gets more and more competitive. This is not an industry that's built on burnouts. It's a lot of hard work, and I mean, you're doing it because you love it. There's so many reasons that people shouldn't keep going for this, but that's like any kind of startup type of thing, you know?
Right.
Just like the grind of it.
Definitely, it was a lot of fun, kind of the intro to cannabis. This was my first cannabis job, working at Space Buds in the recreational market, so it was a really awesome intro to kind of working in that setting. But, you know, working on farms and stuff, I think one of the first places I trimmed at was for one of my friends, and I kind of automatically knew just like I was connected with the plants in some way, so that was definitely where I always kind of knew my path was headed. And working on farms, it just kind of happened. You know, you're a trimmer for a while, is where you start, and growers quit, you know, turnover happens, and you're at the right place at the right time, and you just got to like take advantage of all the opportunities that you get, because they don't really come that often. So you just gotta.
And if there is still remnants of that sort of slacker mentality, that's the time to seize and just kick ass and show up what's possible out there with a strong work ethic.
Because you have to stand out, because there is a ton of people in this industry here, so you really have to stand out with hard work and stuff.
And I would say too, like, just as some advice, like, don't get discouraged. Like, it's a really competitive field out there, and I put in a lot of applications.
And you got to move, you know. I moved a few times just to where you could do it, you know. And now you have more of the country opening up and realizing it and wanting it, but they still don't have it. So you still have a lot of people that would do it but can't. So now they're moving to even further the competition in states that have it. We see that all the time. We have resumes from all over the place.
I'd say what's nice now too, though, is that with states that are becoming more, recreational legal, is there's a lot more research that has been done and a lot more access to information. So even if you are in states that it's not necessarily to that point yet, there's a lot of stuff you can research constantly and look up, and things like this. This podcast is a great example. Right. Yeah. There's
just
a ton.
First few, right?
I got all my knowledge from Arizona. There's not much knowledge to be found there.
Right.
Yeah, all from the internet.
Totally.
But even the more the knowledge is out there, it's fueling people to want to be a part of it more.
That was such a cold statement about Arizona. But I can say, having grown up there for a bit, there is, and it gets baked off in the summer, man. There's not a lot.
Well, Rich, what about you? Do you ever, if you were to cross over, to the green side, what do you think you'd want to do, if anything?
It's a good question. I mean, it's always easy to say, I'll do marketing. But I think at some point I'd be more interested in creating more experiences. And then I find that just naturally tend to be a bridge builder. So it'd probably be more ways of finding all right, how could we get the cannabis industry to be more accepted
maybe
in ways and to create and to create more opportunities to benefit the tourism industry in the same way
to other sectors.
Like, how do we get the weed industry to be revered as in the same way that wine industries are? Because I think that's the perfect example, because it can deal to clientele at various levels, from super high to just your average Joe.
Yeah, I think 2021 we're going to start seeing people really reaching for that possibility. If things do kind of calm down with vaccination and everything rolls out, people start resembling some sense of social interaction. I think we're going to start seeing a push towards, because of how it became essential and all of the positive things that have followed cannabis, even more surging through the press through 2020 and all the other things that were going on. I think there's going to be a lot more interest in bridging those gaps and meeting
I think
people
there's going
like
to be a lot of budget
it.
shortfalls also in the next few years, where people are going to go, how do we fill this gap? And they go, well,
without relying on federal government to do it. This is a great way to
help
yourself.
And even though, as we discussed tons on this part, the taxing on cannabis right now is totally fucked. But if it starts to open the door and then we can start to fix the problem, I'm for it.
They're still creating jobs, and it's getting people kind of into an industry.
And you just have to keep breaking down the stigma. It's there. The government built it up for decades and decades, so it's just going to take away.
Just kind of looking at it, really, I mean, this was the thing about the stimulus, when they were talking about stimulus package, not to get political, but it was just a statement that was made when they were talking about introducing cannabis legislation, and someone made the comment that was, well, why are we talking about cannabis when we should be talking about small business? And that's scary, because we are a tremendous small business, and we are creating jobs in every state and bringing in tremendous tax revenue. So to have that separation, I think really needs to be looked at differently, from that level, which will then start seeing how we're being not treated fairly for what we're bringing to the economy in different ways, and how we're going to be helping to generate revenues continuously in sectors that need it. So, okay, well, what would you tell someone that might be skeptical about the industry or getting into it, or might be on the fence? What would you say to them that maybe is just not sure about cannabis, or they're still kind of weighed down by some of the stigmas over the last 40 years plus?
I would honestly say you kind of have to really look at how much passion you have for the situation and just for cannabis in general. Because if you're not super, driven or really want to learn more or want to take that leap or take that jump, it might not be the industry for you, because it's definitely worth it, But you just have to have that passion for it, I think, is super crucial.
Yeah, I think if you just kind of come in here thinking you got an easy gig and you can slide in, you're gonna this is one thing that really bothers me, is a lot of people say that there's a black mark on this industry, that if you work in this industry for a while, you're kind of like blacklisted from other industries because you've worked in cannabis. I think that's changing over time as legality has happened, but that also depends on what you do.
Well, desire to go back is changing also to these other industries because there's more growth opportunities, and then the longer you're here in the earlier stages, you suddenly become a more desired expert in a field that is limited amounts of them, as opposed to being in a saturated market where you could become an expert, but that's already been, those ships have sailed.
Right, you're expert 5,429.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're running a little low on time, but I think it's the perfect time to move on to our sacrifice and conspiracy talk, which today so happens to be a classic. So it's UFOs, and I know it's not the most original, but we chose it because there have been some serious new developments over the past year, or few years at least, worth a new discussion for what it could mean for the future, or maybe sooner than you think.
Yeah, all right. Well, space cadets and all the UFO enthusiasts, get ready for some of this discussion. And don't forget to get your trusty strain journal ready so that all these sacrifices are not in vain. Philip, why don't you tell us a little bit about what we're tossing to the volcano tonight?
Sure, let me bust out the strain journal first. So we are going to be trying the Blunicorn from Gardens of Odin. It is a cross between unicorn poop and blue sherbet. It kind of reminiscent of the garlic sherb, but really different effects. And
yeah, garlic sherb was potent and could knock you down pretty hard after.
I just feel like after you said unicorn poop, all I can think of was squatty potty.
Everybody said that yesterday, and I have no clue what a squatty potty is.
It was this ad they ran on social media forever where it was a unicorn doing a soft serve shit. And it was all about how the squatty potty helps you with your BMs.
I'm definitely not going to admit that I bought the Costco 2-pack of squatty potties. $10, it was a deal.
Well, we know our sponsorship's coming.
But yeah, I mean, it's from in-house genetics, and it's been really consistent with Gardens of Odin. They've had some really good stuff, and one thing I really like about their stuff in general is that they don't grow off the trendy stuff that everyone else is growing. They've been kind of just growing their own thing, and all their stuff comes out just, it's got this like
top
this
quality,
taste.
yeah. Just
they
top
don't
quality
always have
terps.
the numbers on it, which is the only thing that hurts them. But it's still, I mean, they're 18, 17, 16% still hits you like you would assume. If you didn't tell anyone what the percentage was and they just would smoke Gardens of Odin stuff, it's all feels top shelf. It tastes top shelf. It
looks top
expands
shelf
in your lungs.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
They got a Dutch treat that is, totally Dutch treat.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
They got Blackberry Kush, which is a classic, and they get some really great mild strains like the lavender, desert lavender.
Oh, I didn't realize that was from them. That one's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
There's a platinum OG breath, some garlic breath, there's some good stuff. I mean, this one's actually a lot. This seems like it's supposed to be more of a in the middle fun kind of.
It's very
effect.
euphoric. Yeah, very euphoric.
Maybe we'll see some aliens off that. And feel free to follow along by checking out our weighing in section on spacebudsthedispensary.com. Just click on the review and conspiracy icons to tell us what you think.
And when we come back, we'll be discussing the most recent developments in UFO disclosure.
Hell yeah, let's do this.
And we'll be right back. Alright, welcome back everyone. Before we talk about UFOs, let's discuss the delicious herbs we just vaporized. Speaking of vaporizing, I guess that's pretty much how an alien would consume weed, or at least that's what I would think. But I can say I'm feeling some delightful vibes from this Blunicorn. So how's everyone else feeling?
Definitely feeling pretty light, pretty floaty.
I like it too. I think it tastes good. It reminds me of like a good gelato or wedding cake vibes, birthday cake.
Ice cream cake.
You hungry?
Ice cream. Not as kind of relaxing. I love ice cream, but not quite as relaxing as ice cream cake. I think it'd be more of a functional, fun daytime thing.
Yeah, a really nice light,
Tastes
sweeter
good.
flavor too.
Do you think it's a coincidence that the volcano looks like a UFO?
Whoa.
Well, it is German engineered.
And there goes Philip. Which I think is the most accurate review we can have for the Blunicorn right there. That ship has left the dock.
No, I think it tasted great. It smoked great too.
Totally.
I really like Gardens of Odin stuff, regardless of their fluctuating testing percentages.
This definitely is like a more sativa-y garlic sherbet in a way. Like that blue sherbet feels
Yeah, that
different.
sherb is in there though. I think that's what that
The
tastes.
GMO, like whatever that Sophie's breath mix in this, it's more sativa heavy than like just the GMO mixed with the blue sherbet.
And like usually GMO will dominate most things it's in, and so you get that chemi smell really quick or really strong. And this one doesn't have that. I think it has more of the sherb kind of finishes it off, which I like more, I think.
For sure.
All right, well, we wanted to send out our intergalactic high five to the Gardens of Odin for this Blue Unicorn for its epic sacrifice. And then, all right, Space Cadets, it's time to talk about UFOs. And UFO history runs deep, and we definitely are not trying to give any history lessons here, but there have been some very interesting developments with recent UFO disclosures that may have a dramatic effect on life as we know it, for better or worse. So let's dive into some of the recent headlines on the subject and discuss how many ways it can impact all of us, as well as how it can impact the future. But first, let's just go around the circle here and talk about the most compelling story you've heard that made you believe in UFOs, if any.
So this actually is kind of ties into the trim room that we kind of mentioned earlier. I met a really cool person in the trim room one time, and they were talking about this experience they had with some testing on contacting aliens and stuff, and Mike knows about this too.
This has CE5.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
Stephen Greer contacting.
Yeah, for sure. So he watched a lot of his stuff too, and that the whole documentary, and was really moved by it. And so he tried this experiment with a couple of his friends, and it was really fun to watch him talk about it because he looked so entranced and just very passionate about it. And he said it was like he was partying with aliens and stuff, and just a
But
really.
you gotta be more specific than that. What
They did some like really powerful circle stuff. I guess they stood all together and did
so
some.
they went through the process of contacting. But what do you say happened?
He just said that they saw some lights shining through the air coming close to them. I don't remember if he said anything specific about a ship being there or not, but I do know there was also some mushrooms being ingested at the time. So, they just said they felt some really high vibrations and some really intense energies and saw some things in the sky. So that was kind of an interesting story to hear.
I don't have a specific story, but a close family member of mine that's like their thing is aliens. So I'm convinced if someone wants to spend that much time looking into it and feels that justified talking about it, that there's got to be something out there just in general.
Right, they're definitely not alone by the numbers of people that have a not just fascination, but almost dedication of their life to the subject. I think that some of the compelling stories were, I guess, maybe more of the UFO file disclosures that you see through military bases where they've captured things kind of like shutting down nuclear bases or things like that, where that's been documented. Or there was a couple Air Force individuals that there was a ship that was declassified and these documents disclosed that landed on their Air Force base, and one of them touched it and had this weird experience where he was seeing all these binary numbers, and they translated it, but they were saying it was a UFO. They said eventually that was saying it was a probe from the future or something like that.
Interesting.
But just because of the nature of who was declassifying it, that seemed compelling, Personally, I don't know if I think maybe my stepfather, I would believe him because he doesn't seem like he bullshits about stuff like that or is a fanatic about anything, just sort of like down to earth. And there was a thing called the Hudson Valley UFO sightings, I think in the 80s, and he was around during that era in upstate New York. And then what his descriptions matched what I had read independently was that they watched sort of a giant black triangle, soundless, and just still right above the tree lines. But look, I definitely believe he believes he saw what he saw, and I don't disbelieve him. But without seeing it, it's hard to gauge. But it latches up with everything, and he's not someone to kind of make something like that up. And then personally, I think actually here in Oregon was the only time I've ever feel like I've seen anything strange. I was driving back from Eugene to Springfield, and there was just like, and it was actually the day of the
blood moon.
No, when the solar eclipse.
Alignment.
Yeah, when there was a full solar eclipse. And I was joking because you watch a lot of Doctor Who, and anytime there's a big event on Earth, there's always like all these aliens that come around to watch it. Mm-hmm. So I was like, there's a time to never see UFOs. It'd be like this weekend. Maybe they're all here to see the big event, right? Mm-hmm. And that night I was driving, and I saw this weird green. It just looked like a zigzag light floating by. And I was like, what the hell is that? I actually took a picture of it, and I have it, show you guys. And it was at night, but all you see is it just has this like almost looks like a lightning bolt of like a green tail burner of something. And that's it, you know. But it was unexplainable. I don't know what it was. I almost forgot about it, so I was flipping through my phone and saw the picture. And that's probably the closest thing I've ever really seen. I think one time with my younger brother, we saw, it looked like the shadow of something really large. Like it looked like we were looking up, and there was it looked like 3 points of a star that formed a triangle that were so high up in space that it was sort of blocking out anything above it, but there was no definition to it or anything within those 3 points of the stars, and it was just so big it was kind of scary. But you just saw it move all the way across the horizon. There's 2 of them, and then it was gone, and you're like, okay. So
I've had like the rare exception of being able to like hang out with an astronaut for like an entire day, and it was actually the astronaut that was tasked with doing photography on the space station, and he's ended up spending, I think, around 260 days orbiting the planet at one point, and I think over a year, in over multiple trips. But I asked him, like, kind of, and it came up because I was, what's the question that you just kind of just hate getting? And he's like, the UFOs, man. He's just like, everyone, like, there's always someone in the crowd that's so passionate about it, and they think I'm hiding it from them,
right.
And they think that there's this whole like conspiracy around it. It's like, but man, I've been there. I've been sitting there looking out into nothing. Right. You know, like out the port.
Even then,
of
I'm
the
sure
space
you only
station.
have a small port that only covers so much space. And you still,
but then,
like,
you're not
the
obscured
right
by the light of the planet too. So like you're seeing a million other things that you normally wouldn't. But he's just like, there's never been any weird encounters. He's like, because trust me, he's like, I was raised on Star Trek. He's like, I wanted to be the astronaut that made contact. He's like, that's like what they dream for, because they're all scientists.
Right.
But I know personally, I think the thing that got me the most excited in a realistic way was when they were like, thought they had identified a superstructure in space, when they were like, oh, and they thought they were bouncing something off.
You mean like a superstructure, like independent in space?
Yeah,
or
that like they thought they found
or
something that was in a shape and of a size that could not have been a natural occurrence. So it would have been like a planet-sized object.
Was that
someone
object that another article you're talking about? It was that object they've tracked coming from another, like deep in space, that they weren't sure it was a UFO or another.
Well, there was this other thing that recently where it may have passed through, but it may have been a piece of rock from some sort of structure or another planet, just because the shape of it was so unnatural.
Yeah, it was like almost like a needle.
Yeah. It was kind of flat, but this was like. And it ended up being, I think, a radio error. But then it was like, because that to me would signify intelligence, right? To see that something had to have been constructed.
Right.
Then that would give me, like, hope that there would be, outside life. And then that something could have been, like, sending ships by. But otherwise, I feel if you can send a ship to our planet, you'd have sensors of some way of knowing how to avoid.
Or avoid what we're...
Detection.
What about you? Have you ever seen anything that you thought was strange, potentially, at all, just personally?
I like a good UFO video. Like, I can't lie. Like,
it's surprising that there's not really a tremendous amount more of them, right? Mm-hmm. Considering the technology and the things that we do get on video.
But then if you work enough with video editing and processing, like, you learn that, how effects can happen and how, like, things can be doctored. But I want to believe. I wish there was there. But, like, I just haven't seen it.
Right, personally, yeah.
As we have the I want to believe poster right there. Yeah. I mean, personally, when I was in Russia, when I would visit the summer houses that we had out like in the countryside, my mother would take all these pictures, and these are like the most stereotypical countrysides, like wheat fields with giant sunflowers. And in the distance, it's clear skies, but when she would take pictures regularly, there would be these like weird silver like discs just in the background.
Okay.
And I was recently looking at properties again, just kind of out on the countryside, and in the same pictures, weird discs in the background. And these are more modern photos.
Pictures?
But even different areas have those same, and they look kind of like UFOs. It's just like a silver.
They're suspended in air.
What about you, Megan? Any in-person weirdness?
Yeah, this summer actually I had a really weird encounter that I kind of blew off as just like a weird experience, because I don't really know very much about like the science behind the reflection of the sun at night and the heat and all of that stuff, but I was at my grandparents' ranch, and it's like super far, like up north in Northport, Washington, and Colville. I don't know if you guys know where that's at. It's like past Spokane and stuff, but there was this one little light. I was sitting in bed, and it was completely dark outside, and there was a bunch of stars. And then over the hillside, you'd see this little light pop up, like kind of far in the distance, and it would chill, kind of go in like a circle for a little bit and move in a weird way, and then it would kind of disappear, and then the light would show back up, and then it would go away. And that happened like 2 nights in a row, and so it was super weird for me, but I didn't want to mention it to anybody else because they're pretty religious and they don't really believe in that sort of stuff, which is totally fine. But it was a really weird experience, and it'd be cool for that to happen again, but it was also kind of scary, you know.
And I was actually at a wedding at a friend's in Jamaica. We all were out and we saw, it looked like a disco ball going off in the sky. And we were like, that doesn't look right. So I was like, no, that's a planet. We're like, planets don't change colors like that. They don't look that big, but it just was stationary. And, you know, you go kind of about your night. It's a wedding, you know what I mean? And then I remember just thinking about it later, like, wow, that was really strange. And I looked it up on YouTube, and there's this thing called, like, the disco ball star that shows up every now and then. And these people have recorded it, and there's actually done, like, freeze frames on it. And it's really interesting. It's just strange, you know? So I don't know what it is, but definitely seen it. But it just looks like a sort of a disco ball, like just red, green, blue lights rotating around, like rotating in a stationary position. It's weird too.
Well, all right, this is interesting. So let's move over to these recent headlines on the subject. Did you guys see these ones, including there's a whole bunch of things regarding the Pentagon with officially releasing some UFO videos. There's a task force to investigate UFO sightings, and then the Pentagon's UFO unit will make some findings public. And that with some of the COVID-19 relief and spending bills, the U.S. intelligence agencies have 180 days to share what they know about UFOs. So that's all in development, all in government stuff. So what have you guys heard about these things?
I mean, it sounds pretty exciting. When we had Senator Peters on podcast, that was just when they had released those videos. And he was able to kind of tell us a little bit about the fact that they just know that they're not us, they're not anybody else that we know of. He wasn't able to say if they knew where they were coming from or where they were going, but that's a huge statement in itself, and that makes a lot of other questions come up. So it makes sense that they've been, you know, sort of ordering these investigations, that they were going to release those videos that they did, which are really interesting. And then it's fascinating. I didn't even know this till recently, that in the COVID-19 bill that there was a stipulation put in there that's linked to disclosure versus funding. So just in order to continue funding, there has to be more disclosure, which is a unique angle to take or approach to getting more disclosure to the people. So I think that's exciting, you know. What about you guys?
I thought it was pretty wild for them to kind of come out with stuff like that or make it, you know.
Did you see the video?
Bill. Yeah, definitely. And it's kind of crazy because when you think how long they've been trying to cover this stuff up, it's just mind-blowing to think that they're going to actually open up about this stuff and release some things and kind of admit to stuff.
Well, they were saying, well, now it's like the reason why the video was able to be shown was that the jets were actually upgraded with their radar. So they actually weren't picking this up before.
It was a leaked video, right? That was, it like initially leaked out. I think,
I'm not sure how it came out at first, but then they confirmed it, and been sort of haven't really said too much on the subject after, other than they were going to be investigating it more.
Because even in the video, the person tracking it's saying like this is pretty weird, just how fast it can move.
How fast it's going, and then I mean you look at the quality of the waters, like you could see like the ripples on the water. So I mean that's a pretty high def video. And again, wasn't really able to say, you know, if we knew where they were going or if they were coming from off the planet, because you're curious, you know, is it something has this been going on? Is this here? Are we just able to sort of detect it now? Or is this new? Or is it just new to us, you know?
Well, some of the other things, or some of the headlines, though it may not be quite a UFO, but there was the news about alien bacteria might live in the clouds of Venus. And that's what was just interesting to me from a scientific perspective, because you have Venus, then you have, the moons of Jupiter. That could potentially have ice layers on them, so there could be water pockets underneath there, and then water being, the key ingredient for a number of life forms.
Mars had some as well, right?
Right, and they said with the moon too, they're finding water on the moon.
Right.
The
Yeah.
universe is a lot more wet
Nice.
than they thought.
Well, yeah. That's what they're hoping for. But that always just gives, we hope that, life might not be, in that Doctor Who perspective, right? But it might prove that life is more abundant, is that it just proves a purpose in certain things. It's got to break down chemicals and it creates its own, circle of life in whatever environment it has to be in, including the incredibly hot and acidic environments of Venus.
In line with just all the other ocean worlds that I think might be out there, I think there's sort of a reason why we're seeing these kinds of headlines come out, because they all sort of help to ease the news of these, like, hey, there's water out there. Oh, well, we all know water is life, so if there's water out there, we can kind of make the subconscious connection that there's probably life in some way. We're kind of being warmed up to that, and they say, well, there's bacteria on just on this part of Venus, and well, that's like, well, okay, well, that's confirming that there is life. So if there's bacteria, we kind of can make the subconscious connection that at some point it could evolve and there could be a sentient life, and if we can absorb that, we can absorb this. And then in combination, now we also see that they're confirming that we're seeing evidence of crafts that are not connected to human civilization. Mm-hmm. So I think it's sort of all connected in a lot of ways, where it's sort of hitting it from a lot of different angles to get people ready for these, for at least absorbing the reality that we might be finding ourselves in.
Well, I think with just like the privatization of space now, like the amount of like the slow drip that we've gotten is only going to just...
And they may see it may be hard to keep in the box anymore with
Exactly.
privatization of space. So why not just kind of get in front of it?
Sure.
And not be painted as the bad guy anymore. And kind of use, we have new technology. We can start to get some of this stuff out there now.
Well, then, the other headlines definitely kind of like add on to this. It's just that there could be plentiful more ocean worlds in the Milky Way. And then the other headline being that there could be 36 alien civilizations sharing our galaxy.
Right, it's like the evolution of headlines towards sentient life being discovered.
Right. Right. The thing I enjoy, though, is just like of thinking about, what other types of life forms could be created or things, that don't involve water, or in some way. And
that's like that Alien World show.
Yeah, it's a real trip just to think of like crystalline creatures or
just how
or something
gravity
else.
affects things differently.
Mm-hmm.
They say in some other planets you just have these really, based on what we understand, really flat creatures just because the gravity is so strong. But maybe that's just an assumption based on what we know and how things would really evolve.
Like a horizontal toad or something.
Yeah. Well, I think like the most bummer thing though is when you finally actually get to that level of understanding physics and time dilation, that you understand that, even if there was, and they left right now, and we tried to meet in the middle, it's gonna be 2,000 years.
And then what are you going back to?
Or even they're like, but if you get the speed of light or faster than speed of light, you're like, that's still gonna take 6.5 years.
Maybe.
It's a lot of time, and then what are you going to? You're leaving a beautiful planet.
Maybe that's why aliens won't visit us. Our lifespans are too short. They feel bad for us, so they won't take us anywhere. We know we're in the middle of nowhere.
Is that the cosmic
you could
joke,
just pass
right?
along some of the medical advances.
Are we the fruit flies of the galaxy?
That would be so
Yeah,
depressing.
care package would be nice.
Or if it was just like a way that we were being governed. We're like, well, let's just put the aging meter on there, because we saw what happened back in the day when they lived to be 700, 800, 1,000 years old. You talk about change being slow to happen now, But no, seriously though. So, what do you guys think the real impact of really knowing for sure, without a doubt, that more advanced civilizations not only exist but could dwarf not only in history and technology and even magnitude pretty much our little blue planet and all we believe in, and pretty much show us that we're not the main character in the story of the universe?
I don't know, man. It's kind of, are you hoping for a smarter species to be following a prime directive and not to engage and affect our own development, or is it bad knowing that someone's smarter than you, right?
Well, at that point,
there's plenty in the last 4 years that showed us that human ego can be a very dangerous fucking thing.
And human ego and emotions can be very dangerous, especially Yeah.
But I think just the fact that we're here shows that they're not hostile if they were out there, because at least in the sense that we would think of war as we know it here, or an invasion, because we just wouldn't be here anymore.
Right.
I mean,
And I also just think if you're traveling
which
across...
makes me hope it's more of a Prime Directive issue going on out there.
Right,
you know,
right. And
that
if
there's
you could
plenty of
travel across
resources.
space, you've got some sort... You'd know how to set off an explosion that would destroy a planet. Right?
Well, it could be
Right.
also that their tech is just so advanced that we can't even see them. So it's like almost like a two-dimensional being trying to like interact with a three-dimensional
And
being.
that's where it gets real trippy, right? Is thinking like they could already be all around us, but we just don't understand that there's dimensions that we can't even comprehend yet.
Or even resources in a way we don't understand. I mean, they keep finding more Earth-like planets, and if a lot of them are uninhabited, and there's just plenty of places
Well,
to
it's
go
dark
around
matter.
once you can travel in space.
It's the gaps in space and dark matter, and then what is our black holes really this? Because then they're like, our supermassive black holes actually wormholes
Right.
in different ways. Like there's still
This is
so
the sun
much to
could be a
learn.
wormhole, just the other side of it, you know, coming out, you know.
I mean, in some ways, maybe it's like opening Pandora's box in a way, because, like we were saying with religion, that would completely blow open, I think, some theories
That's a
of
big
modern
thing.
day religion.
Yeah.
And I feel like the
How's
world
it-
has a lot of
Wouldn't it be
problems
nice
already,
if-
so blowing that up.
But just to avoid
If the Bible could
problems-
actually finally be an actual book of fairy tales, and everyone goes, "Oh, that's quaint. That's nostalgic."
Well, the more you
Remember when
learn
we
about-
thought that we were one planet?
Well, the more you learn about advanced tech, it puts different parts of the Bible in perspective of what might have been going on in antiquity, just as far as sound technologies and things like that. But when it comes to religion, that's a slippery slope. But I mean, if you have, but don't, I think ultimately religion comes from the pursuit of knowledge and just trying to find out how we got here, who put us here. And if we have the opening of to a new civilization that has answers of millions of years of exploring these same things, understanding consciousness, understanding the nature of matter and how mind and spirit and body work at it.
Well, if you
ways
look
we
at the
don't understand.
Renaissance and what was kicked off from just thinking that the sun revolved around us instead of we revolve around the sun, like just that shift suddenly created a whole new level of humanism that happens. So you have to, like, change hurts, and we know that humans don't handle change well all the time, but eventually after they get through the change, it's for the benefit.
Well, I think I agree, and I think it's better to face that. And there was I forget where I saw this, but the guy had put it in a very good perspective. He said, we may not be the main character in the story of the universe, but we have a great supporting role. And if that's the case, it's still worth learning more about that and discovering who we are and what our role in the unfolding of consciousness.
Who knows, the cosmic test should just be like, can we not kill this planet? Right? And that's the
First grade.
It isn't actually like developing warp speed. It just goes, oh, they have the capability of destroying the planet and they managed to not do it. Welcome to the party.
Well, that's where it comes back to sort of UFOs, where I don't think we're even there yet, because it sounds like they have to keep turning everything off from what some of these declassified documents say, at least as far as nuclear bases go. So we're getting there anyway. So, all right, well, before we finish up, I mean, directly, what do you guys think? Would you rather live in a world where everything's out on the table, even if it means we are more of a supporting role in the greater cosmic story? Or do you think you'd feel better kind of staying protected in our little bubble where we're the pinnacle of everything that ever was, and we're still just searching in the dark for any other intelligent life?
I think this is a hard question for Americans, but having come from an English family and from a family that saw an empire crumble, it's sometimes it's fine to just like get a little comeuppance and being put in your place in the grand picture of things. But I'd rather know. I'd rather know just so that I know what purpose we can serve.
Yeah, ultimately, I guess we all kind of want that answer. But I mean, my mom, as she say, you always like blanket statements that are easy. She's like, well, yeah, because blankets are comfortable. That's a good point. What about you, Megan?
Dang, I don't know, man. I'd probably say more of like a supporting role in a greater cosmic story. I think that's probably like
I'd
something.
rather learn more about that.
Yeah, I think so, for sure.
And just sort of think like, all right, let's duck our hand, put our heads down, and go back to business as usual.
Yeah, I kind of want to learn more and just like keep, exploring a little bit more about that cosmic stuff instead of just going back to just thinking about normal stuff.
I'd rather know, but I know a lot of people don't respond well to change. Humans really don't respond well to change, and I feel like I already know there would be a group of people that they could show them all the proof in the world that there are aliens. They will say they're fake. They don't believe it.
That's
I mean,
true.
we've seen just in
Right.
general how people are. So I don't know how like the onboarding process of that is even going to work, and how
Or if there's even an integration. If there would be any kind of integration.
As long as they
other
don't
than
get on
just
Twitter, we're going to be fine.
It's wild to think about that
Already on
different
Twitter.
perspective. I mean, to have your mind be closed off for your whole life and not even being willing to open up to even something like this that's being shown to you by the government is mind-blowing to think about.
I mean, I'll be honest, I've always been interested in this subject and fascinated. You know, I mean, just with the X-Files and really finding out, really just kind of wanting to uncover all the answers. But with the reality of it kicking in, I mean, you really, you know, with them saying, all right, look, this is for real. You know that there's more coming down the pipeline, right? So that really does change the nature of reality, where it becomes this fun, ooh, this is taboo, ooh, this is being hidden, this is a fun subject, because you know no one's really going to give you the answer, versus like, bam, here it is, digest that, and think about your place in existence now with a whole new backdrop, which can be scary. But even though that's scary, I think it's still like the point of life, and we're all just, even if we're all part of one consciousness, we're all individual probes, which are just meant to learn and experience. So once you stop doing that or close off, then what's the point, you know?
Right.
Well, I think there's like some greater context to that. It's like when presidents say like, when I get in there, I'm going to disclose, and then they either don't really talk about like why they don't want to disclose it, or they just, you know, move on with it. And there's got to be something they know that they're not.
Right. I think
For whatever
they're
reason.
given a higher perspective, which they didn't have before, which just like, it's hard to judge anybody in certain positions of power, because as regular people, we don't have access to all the information ever, you know. So they may have a whole new context or access to data that shows how people react to certain situations, how dangerous it could be. But that's a slippery slope to just give that power away and say, okay, well, you know, we can never handle anything, and run with that.
What's a scary thought to me is both whether someone like Cheeto could get access to like UFO information, and both like clearly, because he's not showing any kind of concern, would release it, or if it's so scary that something scared Cheeto so bad that he wouldn't release it. Like, and that's a terrifying.
Well, that's the
concept.
idea, right? It's just that, what is it that, it's like, you know, when people get in office and then they're like, oh, they're going to do this stuff, and then they're given like the summary of the real state of affairs. It's like, oh. Or I think, you know, there's been a lot of proof that a lot of presidents just haven't been given access at all.
Right.
They've demanded inquiries. I think that's what happened in the current administration too. That's why they tried to do this way of getting information through funding, which is a unique approach, you know. But I guess you hit them at the dollar is where it counts, right? So I guess we'll have to stay, you know, kind of abreast of what's going on. And I think if we're lucky enough, maybe we'll get Senator Peters on here again. He got reelected, and he was, you know, he's been on the Intelligence Committee, kind of listening to the briefings on this stuff. So maybe we'll get lucky and we'll learn a little bit more from the source itself. All right, so I think that's all the time we have for this episode.
But we want to hear from you at spacebuzzdispensary.com. Click on the Weighing In tab, select the conspiracy icon, and feel free to tell us all about your UFO thoughts and feels.
Follow us on twitch.tv/SpaceBudsTheDispensary.
Make sure to watch this super cool video and subscribe on YouTube or spacebudsthedispensary.com to get the whole picture.
All right, this has been episode 9 of Space Buzz the Podcast. Join us again next time for your dose of sci-fi, conspiracy, and cannabis that only Space Buzz the Podcast can provide. Thanks for listening.
Take care.
See you next time.
Peace out!